I'm Renee, host of Roots of Faith. Today we're here in Prairieville visiting the parish of St. John the Evangelist. This is a very vibrant parish and a faith community that has existed since the mid-1800s, but they became a parish in 1919, which means they're celebrating their centennial this year. So join us as we explore their history and the parish here in Prairieville. I have as my guest today Father Jerry Martin here at St. John. Thank you for being on my show, Father Jerry.
My pleasure, Renee. Thank you for doing a show on our parish.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a unique parish. Tell us a little bit about yourself, though. How long have you been here?
Since 2014, this time around. Actually, I was also here at St. John back in the mid-1980s, 84 to 86. I jokingly tell our parishioners that I flunked the first time around, so I got a second chance.
That's cool. So very good. So this parish is very unique. You and I were talking on the phone about what makes it so different. So tell us a little bit about the demographics of it.
Sure, be happy to. Basically, here at St. John, we've got three different groupings, I guess you could say. Obviously, there are a number of folks who grew up in this neighborhood and have been third and fourth generation residents of St. John. Also, we've had a steady flow of people coming in from East Baton Rouge Parish for the last 2 or 3 decades. Then after Katrina, we had a large number of New Orleans people who ended up settling here. So between those three groups, we've really got a very nice blend of people with different backgrounds, different cultures almost.
And probably different ideas for different things going on.
Very much so.
For the parish.
Very much so, yeah.
When this parish was begun, we're looking at like 134 families or even individuals that started this back in 1917.
It was 1919.
1919, what did I say, 17? Yeah.
This year is our centennial year is the only reason why I bothered to correct you.
Right, no. 17 was, when you look at the history of this parish, 17 was when they had missions here, and there had been a faith community here going all the way back. I think the first cemetery was established in the 1700s.
It was.
But, settlement along that Mississippi was always predominant, and then they filter back. We're not exactly close to the river. So by the mid-1800s, there were chapels that we know existed here, and the priests came from Donaldsonville to serve here. Yeah. And then a parish was established, which was at Cornerview in around the 1860s. I'm not going to give an exact 1860 something.
Good girl.
But in that time frame, it became an individual parish, and this region still had a chapel and was part of that parish for many years. And so, we talk about in the old days they used to do missions, where the priest would come, and because the mass services may not have been but once a month or every other weekend when you're in these outlying rural areas, and so. We know that there was a mission held here, and there was a priest that said, the people really wanted more, and got together and said, we're gonna build a church, and that's why I said 1917. Sure. That was when the church, they got together and decided to build a church, and then it was Archbishop Shaw in 1919, after the church was built, that made it its own parish here under St. John the Evangelist.
You have research.
So that's where my head was with that.
One of the reasons why people here in Prairieville wanted their own parish was for religious education purposes.
That's true.
Obviously, like you said, when the priest is coming to visit once, maybe twice a month, you don't have a whole lot of time for religious education. You're doing your liturgy, and he's going back elsewhere. So one of the reasons why people here, and it was 134 people who were the original charter members of St. John, was for the sake of religious education.
Which is still going strong, and we can talk about that, a little bit also, because y'all are part of the school system with St. Teresa.
Yes, actually, just because St. Teresa was overflowing going back 15, 20 years ago, there was a need to expand the school. Well, there was no room on the St. Teresa campus to add additional classrooms. So as a result, the split campus was set up.
Which is really unusual.
St. John now houses pre-K through 3rd grade. St. Teresa's campus now hosts 4th grade through 8th grade.
And that, that's kind of unique because we don't see that. At least I haven't come across it yet in the parishes that I've interviewed that have this kind of system set up. But hey, if it works and it's providing, meeting the needs, it's awesome.
What else is very unique is the way the superintendency is set up. Normally in a given parish, the pastor is the superintendent of the school. Because we have 7 different parishes that feed St. John, we actually have 7 different pastors who together compose the superintendency, which certainly 7 heads are better than one. However, it can get difficult to get all 7 of those pastors together. So at least our decisions are made thoroughly and slowly.
That's awesome. We were talking earlier that this is your centennial year, and when you and I talked on the phone prior to taping this, we discussed things that you were doing with your centennial. So, some parishes celebrate one big event. In your case, you were telling me y'all have had.
Several.
So tell us a little bit about how y'all structured your centennial.
Our actual birthday, I guess to speak, is September 14th of 1919. Mm-hmm. But rather than simply focusing on that date and only that date, we did decide to have several different things throughout the year. Each year we have a parish auction fundraiser that occurs the Thursday before Mardi Gras. Okay. Obviously a nice festive theme to begin with. This year we couple with that our centennial anniversary. Then our parish fair occurs every year at the end of April. Again, a nice festive time because of spring setting.
Right, and a few months from the last celebration.
That's it, exactly.
It's kind of spaced out. That's
so
perfect.
Obviously, as you can well guess, the theme for this year's parish fair was 100 years of celebration and service. Now, again, on June the 1st, we had our annual appreciation meal. That's normally given for everyone who in the last year has served in a parish ministry. So it tends to draw a lot of folk. This year, what we did is we said anyone who has been involved in a parish service ministry within the last 100 years within the history of our parish is open and welcome to come. So really made for a nice gathering, but a lot of wonderful stories as well.
You're right. Wow, that's great.
Come our actual anniversary in September, we'll have reception after each of the 5 weekend masses.
Oh, great.
And also at that time, we have printed 1,000 different copies of the history of our parish. We'll pass those booklets out at that time as well.
Yes, that everybody can continue to celebrate and know, what we're doing here and kind of giving the background.
What I've noticed is people who've been here for generations and generations can't wait to get their hands on the Centennial booklet. Folks that have come within the last 20 or 30 years, so what?
Really?
Exactly. That's why we only printed 1,000 copies. It's going to be folks that have been here for generations and generations that I think are going to enjoy those the most.
Yeah, and then come back and tell you what you left out.
That's so very true, although there better not be much of that because we think we were good and thorough.
Thank you, yeah.
Right. And then we'll close out the year. Our annual parish mission will be the second week in December. Father Whitney Miller has given that one, obviously with the theme of 100 years of gratitude to the Lord.
How fabulous. That is great. Every parish has its own personality, and that is true here. And it's often reflected in the ministries that you see. And some of your ministries, I know, help to bring those 3 groups together. So tell us a little bit about what makes this parish different and some of the great ministries that you have here at St. John.
Very much so. Throughout our diocese, we've had stewardship of ministry for years. As of 5 years ago, we decided that we really needed to emphasize that more. And actually, stewardship of ministry itself has done wonders to bring the 3 groups I'd mentioned earlier, the original folks who have been here for generations, the people who moved in after Katrina, and also the steady flow from East Baton Rouge Parish to Prairieville. To a large extent, those 3 groups stay kind of separate among themselves. However, increasing the number of people involved in parish ministries has done wonders to actually merge those three groups. You know, when you're serving alongside someone else, you're bonding with them. The service activity not only benefits the people you're trying to serve, it benefits those who are doing the serving. And particularly when it comes to building up bonds that connect people together, make them feel at home here in our parish, the emphasizing that stewardship and ministry program has just been wonderful. Another thing that we started back in October of 2016 was the Acts Retreat program. At present, St. Aloysius, Lady of Mercy, St. George, and ourselves are the 4 parishes in our diocese that have delved into the Acts Retreat program. Has just been a wonderful spiritual experience for literally hundreds of our parishioners
Well,
now.
explain to some of our viewers what that actually is, because some of our viewers in some of these other parishes may not be aware.
Sure. Acts Retreat is a Thursday evening through Sunday morning retreat. Couples a number of different spiritual exercises, but it takes its name from A for adoration, C for community, T for theology or church teaching, and then S for service. And it's really those 4 elements of adoration, community, theology or church teaching, and service that compose the 4 elements that make up the weekend. So it makes for a wonderful weekend experience, but again, because it's such a deep experience, it tends to bond together the people.
Those attending,
who
right.
are attending. And of course, what happens is they come back and join an even larger experience of people who've done the Acts Retreat program, which also brings them more and more into parish ministry, parish service itself. So if I had to emphasize 2 of the things that have done the most to unite our parish and bring our 3 different groups together, it would be those 2.
That's so true. That's awesome, though. But I know just in my thoughts when we were talking about the 3 groups, when you've been through something like people that experienced Katrina, you tend to want to stay with those who experience the same things you have, you know?
Yeah.
So it's harder to, to sometimes break away. And newbies coming in, I think a lot of the people that move out here are young families with young kids. And so, at least from what I've experienced, I don't know if that's true, but a lot of the new ones moving from Baton Rouge to here, the younger generation, you're busy raising kids, same type of thing. So what you're saying is perfect with merging, I get it.
Yes, actually, that's another St. John oddity. In the last 5 years, we've had about 675 new families join the parish. The ironic thing about it is approximately 400 of those 675 have lived here for years and years and years. They just never became part of the parish. They just never joined the parish. So a lot of our growth on the parish roster in these last 5 years has been from people who lived here all along and finally decided, oh, I need to go check out this church.
But that just goes to show the roads that you're making in the community, so that's awesome.
Yeah, which has been obviously a wonderful thing to see. We incidentally are now up to 4,420 families.
That was my next question. So
Yeah, that's
great.
actually as of...
From that 100 and...
That's December 31st, 2018. Obviously, we've added a number since then. But it's 13,845 individuals, because so many of those 4,400 families are young families, as you just mentioned. And of course, they're going to have an average of 2 or more children
with them.
So not only do we have a large number of families, but an unusually large number of individuals.
We were talking just about the sheer number of parishioners that you have here. And looking at your physical plan, I mean, this church is quite large. So, I mean, it's obviously handling the mass crowds at seating, 900, 1,000?
Yeah.
Just
at
looking
times
around.
we do have to bring in extra
chairs.
Which can bring us up to 1,000 when needed. And actually, we will soon be replacing our pews.
Oh, okay.
Initially, the pews did not come in a single piece. They were glued together. All right, now, the wood, if you look around the church, is holding up fine. Our problem is the glue is starting to deteriorate. And that's why the pews are starting to fall apart. Now, for several years now, we've had some volunteers in the parish who have repaired the pews as they would fall apart.
Right.
So we were able to do okay. But, you know, it's hard for somebody who's in his 60s to be crawling underneath a pew, for putting in support from the underside to repair the pew. It was time, yeah, exactly.
So that's one of the things upcoming, right, in the church itself.
Yeah,
So, and that will involve new floors as well, right? So
it
new
will.
floors, new pews, all new seating for people
And of course,
that come.
one of the things about coming with the new pews, that will increase our seating by 64.
Oh, good.
And of course, when you're starting to burst at the seams, 64 seats can make a lot of
big
difference.
difference, a big difference.
So that too is one of the things. Also, at present, we have the 2 aisles here in our church. But once we put in the new pews, we will actually shape the arrangement to where we have one 8.5-foot center aisle.
Okay, great. So a little different configuration for those of you who want to come. I mean, it's a beautiful church anyway,
Well,
but to
thank
see
you.
the new configuration after you get it all done. And that'll be upcoming probably for the fall of 2019.
As soon as our tile becomes
Arrives.
available, we'll be able to start the renovation. We'd love to do it early fall. May have to put it off till winter time. It all depends upon the availability
That's
of the
it.
different
Well, the good
tiles
thing
we
is it
select.
is going to happen. So
Yes,
that
in the
then
near
you won't have to
future.
worry about the pews coming apart. But in talking about the families here and the physical plant, we'll come back to some of the features in the church perhaps. But what are some of the other things? I know you've got the parish hall and a new activity center, or is it
We do,
relatively new?
Yeah. Actually, St. John built a community center back in 1984.
Okay.
However, that is used during the school year
Right.
for the cafeteria and also the large meeting area for the entire student body. In other words, our morning prayer each school day begins with the whole community there. Pre-K all the way through third grade.
Right.
And that totals about 450 students
good.
on this campus.
Okay.
And then there are another 330 that are on the St. Teresa
side.
campus. Yeah. So we can fit our whole 415 students in the community center
Great.
for opening prayer, announcements, and so forth. So because that is used so much by the school, it really became necessary to build an additional activity center, which we did complete back in 2017.
Great.
Well, yes, except for the fact that, remember I mentioned earlier how we've been blessed with so many people getting involved in the parish now. We've really outgrown that activity center.
Already.
As many meeting rooms as we put in there are no longer sufficient.
That is amazing, though.
yeah.
I mean, that speaks wonders.
Oh, it's a wonderful problem to have. Nobody's complaining, other than the fact that we're also having to make provisions within some of the meeting areas in the school to double up and also use those for like scripture study groups, faith sharing groups, and so forth. And by the way, I might mention, as you can guess from the size of our parish, we've got over 1,300 students in our PSR catechism classes.
That's awesome.
Exactly. So creating enough classroom space for them
all of that.
obviously takes a bit of logistical planning. But again, a wonderful problem to have.
You're right. We were talking about the physical plant that's here. What about your adoration? You do have an adoration chapel, or
We
which
do.
is dedicated
At present,
for
we're having to
adoration?
use our reconciliation room. We have our weekday confessions before the 8:30 Mass. But what that does is that allows us to do adoration from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at present on weekdays.
Okay, great.
So we actually use the confessional in the church for the time being because it was the only space we had available close to the body of the church. We didn't want to be carrying the Blessed Sacrament back and forth clear across campus.
Sure.
So the reconciliation room converts easily into adoration area. Now, what we're planning, and hopefully this spring we'll actually be able to construct, is a permanent adoration chapel.
Okay, good.
Which will be attached to, but freestanding from the church building. There'll be a walkway that leads from one of the back entrances to the church.
Okay.
And will actually connect with where the Adoration Chapel will be.
And so that's for next spring, you said?
We would certainly hope. A lot of this depends upon when the architectural plans are finished.
Right,
And of course,
understandably.
when we can get some good, affordable bids, I guess it's a good way to put it.
But it's in
we're
the
hoping
works.
for this coming
That's
spring.
upcoming, upcoming
yeah.
plans
Yeah.
for that. So in that will be towards the back, but this campus is really beautiful, and I come here sometimes for 6 p.m. Mass when we're out of town because my parish doesn't have that, and I was not aware, too, of what lies behind the church.
Sure.
We were talking about that. So there's a lot more here. You have the Activity Center, the parish office, community center, the Adoration Chapel right now in the church, but will be to the back,
Sure.
correct? This towards the back. So what else is here on the
Renee,
ground?
One thing that you may not be aware of, I know you're from Lady of Mercy Parish in Baton Rouge
Grew up
originally.
there, correct.
And actually, Lady of Mercy's now church was patterned after St. John.
There's definitely a resemblance.
Yeah.
Every time I come here, I'm aware that probably the architect was the same. Or
It
somebody
was,
along
it was
the line
Desmond Miramont.
was the same. Yep.
Yeah, and the only real difference is the sanctuary area at Lady of Mercy is much larger than our sanctuary area here. But at least the type of bricks that we use, even I guess you could say the floor plan,
Right, the columns
was
are
originally
similar.
very similar. Yeah.
Now, while
very
we're
much
talking about the church, y'all do have beautiful stained glass windows that are absolutely amazing. And when I was researching those, there are, I believe, 6, 3 large ones, 2 small ones, and all of them except one are based on the Gospel of John, which I
Yeah.
found interesting, being St. John's.
Sure.
And they represent different things, and they just really, I'm one of these visual people. When I'm at Mass, the artwork, I like to get there early, and I love to observe a new place. And one of the things that has always drawn me is the stained glass windows here. And even so, when we wrote the history of the Diocese of Baton Rouge, we made sure that we had one of your windows in the book because they just stand out. And they were done, I think, by Sam Wilson was the
Steve.
design. Steve Wilson
Steve
was the designer for those, and when they built this church, correct?
Yeah. Steve had originally done, I think his first project was Lady of the Lake.
Oh, really?
In other words, the early stained glass that was put in there, like leading to the chapel area, you pass through the baptismal window, which is basically the doorway that leads into the chapel area. Steve had done that originally. When I was in St. Joseph in Grosse Tête back in the early 80s, we were so impressed with his work at Lady of the Lake that we got him to do the stained glass windows at St. Joseph Grosse Tête.
The one with the tools in the window?
Yes.
So we'll have to do that show and showcase that
Okay.
one. That one stands out in my mind. That's one of my favorites in the whole diocese. So I know exactly what window you're talking
Right,
about. I didn't realize
exactly.
he had done it.
Then in the
So-
meanwhile, Steve also did St. Patrick in Baton Rouge. So again, when St. John was ready for its stained glass windows, Steve was kind of a natural choice. He's the one that did such a wonderful job on our stained glass windows, and as you can well guess, he is also the one who will be doing our stained glass windows for the upcoming Adoration Chapel. Yeah. So we have just been utterly delighted with his work. It's just given such a prayerful and such an uplifting presence to the church, and we think the chapel's going to be the same way.
Oh, that's great. So outside space, outside meditate. We're talking about, for me, visual is always so inspiring, and I love outdoor space. There's a meditation garden.
There is
behind the church
indeed, yes. It's
that I never knew was
almost
there,
tucked
so I can't wait to
away.
go check it out.
Renee, that is so true. It's towards the back of the campus, and it's somewhat tucked away to give some solitude and some privacy. But the one thing about that is if you don't know where to look for it, you don't necessarily notice it because it really kind of blends in with the large surrounding oak tree. But we do have a meditation garden that is wonderful for like when we're having days of recollection, confirmation retreats, and you want to allow for the individuals making the retreat or the day of recollection to have some quiet, private time for them. It's wonderful for that. And then we'll just have people, especially in gorgeous weather, a little bit cooler than right now, just people who want to enjoy the outdoors and have that St. Francis feel of seeing
That's
God's
it.
face in his creation.
That's me.
Yeah. Well, good.
And that's why I never
love the
knew till I
meditation.
started preparing for this that existed. You know, as much as I've come, I mean, not being in the parish, but coming to Mass, I never knew it existed. And so, having prepared for that, I have not seen it yet, but we will when we finish here.
Okay,
I'll be touring it for sure, you know, from
Good,
everything
good.
that I heard about it. So.
Yes. Now, I might mention kind of like signs of progress. Obviously, when we built that new activity center, we needed to add additional parking for it. When we did the additional parking space, we lost our century-old softball field.
Oh, wow.
Even as we were doing the history of our parish for the Centennial, we came across an advertisement for the 1926 parish fair that included the cutest baby contest.
Oh, no.
That included a speech contest, and that included a public baseball game. So we know that softball field
Was
had
there
been used
then.
literally for the century of our parish, but obviously lost that when we had to build the additional parking area.
And that's one thing your parish, when I was researching this parish to prepare for this, that y'all were famous for your fairs. I mean,
Yeah.
from the time it began, you were famous for having fairs, and y'all, that's a big thing here.
Yeah, actually, there was a little gap in there between the 1930s. At that particular time, the pastor decided to switch from pew fees
I read
and
about
parish
that.
fair income to switch from that to regular offertory collection. So at that point in time, the parish fairs were dropped and started again in 1983.
Oh, in '83, I didn't realize
Yeah,
it was that big of a
exactly.
gap.
There was that much
But
of a
everything
gap,
I read
yeah.
said they were famous for the
Oh,
fairs
yes,
early
yes,
on.
exactly.
And what people don't realize too is this is one of our parishes that did have a fire. The original church that was
Yes.
built in 1919 served until 1968, and it was at a CYO function in July,
Yeah.
this month of 1968, that lightning struck the old church and it burned completely. And the parish was able to immediately start a planning committee to build this. And I think this church was paid off like in 5 years after it was built. And they actually burned the mortgage
Very much
after
so,
a mass. So people may not be aware of that because, you know, people call us all the time about sacramental records. Oh, the parish burned. We don't have that many that burned, but those that did, the sacramentals weren't lost. And in your case, they were not lost.
Yeah.
But we did lose a beautiful church, you know, and replaced it with one just as beautiful
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I might mention, it was a CYO-sponsored picnic on the 4th of July
Oh,
of
really?
1968.
so it was the 4th of July?
It was indeed.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize it
And,
was on the 4th.
you know, obviously the lightning hit the steeple, and the church was wood and
And went right
literally
up.
burned very quickly. But there's so many parishioners who have pictures of it.
Yeah,
In fact,
we have a
you'll
picture in
know-
archives.
Okay.
They'll
it
see one.
May
Yep.
well be the same one that we have in the community
be.
center.
Well, Father, we're just about out of time, and I can't thank you enough for being my guest today on the show. And I can't wait to come back and after this show to go visit the meditation garden. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, and thank the crew for giving us this opportunity to show off our parish.
Very good.
You know, it's a source of delight for us. We're glad to share it.